Polaroids, you were dressed in women's clothes. Were you made ashamed? Why'd you lock them in the drawer? Well, I don't think that I ever loved you more than when you turned away, when you slammed the door, when you stole the car, drove towards Mexico, and you wrote bad checks just to fill your arm. I was young enough, I still believed in war. Let the poets cry themselves to sleep, and all their tearful words would turn back into steam. But me, I'm a single cell on a serpent's tongue as muddy field.
Shipbuilding. That was the backbone of the economy. But it was an industry swiftly dying. In fact, tourism would become the hope for Maine. Islands off the coast would be prime real estate for hotels and tourist retreats. The year is 1912, and suddenly places once viewed as worthless were becoming valuable, including Malaga Island. And this presented a problem for the governor and interested parties due to its approximately 40 inhabitants that had been living there since after the Civil War, descendants of an ex-slave, Benjamin Darling. Fishermen, lobstermen, clam diggers, these people lived off what Maine's land had to offer. Rumors on the mainland said that the children of Malaga had horns and burrowed into the ground, that the people had arrived there as ship captains after years at sea abandoned their concubines on the island before returning home. As far as the locals were concerned, the inhabitants of Malaga Island had to go. Why should they take the responsibility to support these people? The island could make more money as a tourist destination. The people were filthy, inbreds, racially mixed and lawless, barbaric, heathen. And so, after finding a way to purchase the island and become the landlord, the governor issued an eviction notice. The people had 30 days to remove themselves and their belongings. On top of that, he effectively kidnapped a handful of individuals to be held at a school for the feeble-minded. And, in order to ensure the Malagans had no reason whatsoever to return, workers were sent to exhume the graves of the dead and bury them together elsewhere.
I find myself weary and bedraggled trying to review this novel by Paul Harding, This Other Eden. So here we go again.
another attempt to get these thoughts out, to articulate the things I think, and give them to you, the viewer, to do with them what you will. I'm Sim Reads. Welcome to my channel. Thanks for tuning in. It's Booker season, and here we go with the first novel I have read for Booker 2023. If you watched the first 5 minutes of this video, which I assume you did, you have a pretty good synopsis for Paul Harding's novel, This Other Eden. Although Mr. Harding does say in an interview with Barnes & Noble that he did not want to write the story of Malaga Island. He did not want to write an historical fiction novel. I don't know what he meant by that, because this novel pretty closely resembles the Malaga Island tragedy in Maine, as I outlined it in the beginning of this video. There are differences, of course. He renames the island from Malaga Island to Apple Island. The founder of the island, Benjamin Honey, in the novel is loosely based off the founder of the island and settlement in reality, whose name is Benjamin Darling. The missionary that spends his time ministering to the people of the island in the book is named Matthew Diamond. He's a young man that rows his boat over from the mainland to Malaga Island to minister to these people. He's a pretty key player in the story. He's loosely based off of the real live man named Captain George Lane, ex-naval officer in the Civil War, who spent his latter years in his 70s with his wife and his daughters ministering to the people of Malaga Island, building a school there and attempting to reform and bring light into darkness. There's a lot of material from his ministry, handwritten notes, letters written back and forth to different interested parties, a lot of photographs, a lot of which I used in the beginning of this video. Check that out. I'll link it in the description of the video below. It is very interesting. I have no issue with Paul Harding writing a story about something that really happened. The question we all want to know is, does the man deliver? Does he bring us home? Does he make the book worth reading? First paragraphs, first sentences of books are really important to me, not because I want them to always hook me or open with a banger. Like a lot of creative writing teachers would tell you, that opening sentence is so important because you've got to hook the reader. I don't need the opening sentence to hook me. I do want the opening sentence to be compelling, if it's possible. What I'm really looking for when I'm reading that first opening paragraph of a novel is the writing style and the tone and the voice, how the author introduces themselves. And so this opening paragraph of the novel, I'm going to read it to you and just kind of give you my first impressions. Benjamin Honey, American, Bantu, Igbo, born enslaved, freed or fled at 15, only he ever knew. Ship's carpenter, aspiring orchardist, arrived on the island with his wife Patience, née Rafferty, Galway girl, in 1793. He brought his bag of tools, gifts from a grateful captain he had saved from drowning, or plunder from a ship on which he had mutinied and murdered the captain, depending on who said, and a watertight wooden box containing 12 jute pouches. Each pouch held seeds for a different variety of apple. Honey collected the seeds during his years as a field worker and later as a sailor. He remembered being in an orchard as a child, although not where or when, with his mother, or with a woman whose face over the years had become what he pictured as his mother's, and he remembered the fragrance of the trees and their fruit. The memory became a vision of the garden to which he meant to return. No mystery, it was Eden. Years passed, and he added seeds to his collection. He recited the names at night before he slept: Ashmead's Colonel, Flower of Kent, Duchess of Oldenburg, and Warner's King, Ballyfatten, Cat's Head. That's the first opening paragraph. And let me just kind of describe to you what I'm feeling as I'm reading Paul Harding open the novel this way. It feels to me as though there are embellishments that he is using. He's using a device to make his character more interesting, to make his characters more interesting, and it feels forced to me. I feel like it's an easy road. It's an easy path forward. Of course, it's evocative to see a character that's so passionate about becoming an orchardist that he recites these poetic names of these exotic apple varietals to himself as he goes to sleep at night. Names like Ashmead's Colonel, Flower of Kent, Duchess of Oldenburg, and Warner's King, Ballyfatten, Cat's Head. That's all very poetic and exotic. It doesn't feel more human. It feels contrived. Even the details of Benjamin Honey's history. Freed or fled at 15, only he ever knew. This lair of mystery, ship's carpenter, aspiring orchardist. He arrives on the island. He brought with him a bag of tools, gifts from a grateful captain he had saved from drowning, or plunder from a ship on which he had mutinied and murdered the captain, depending on who said. It feels too contrived. It feels too unrelatable. I don't know. There's something idealistic, I think, about adding those elements to the scaffolding of a character. What you're essentially telling me about Benjamin Honey, this ship's carpenter, this ex-slave that is living in 1793, is when he arrives at the island. So we're talking about hard times for people, hard times for everybody, especially an ex-slave who is trying to make his way in this world. And he arrives at this island and he's got this bag of tools and he has these 12 pouches of orchard seeds, and somehow he has time to foster this hobby and this passion of orcharding when he's working as a ship's carpenter. If you read historical accounts of what it was like to live on a ship at that time, there isn't time for you to be studying orchard practices or collecting seeds. Like, all of these different dynamics just feel very idealistic, and it's not Paul Harding lying to me, the reader, because I can kind of see through the unreality of it, the larger-than-life dynamic of it. It feels more like Paul Harding lying to Paul Harding. If it's a story that is meant to be a larger-than-life story, that's a whole different thing. What it makes me feel is that the characters are not more human, but they're less human, and they're less relatable. I'm already feeling that I'm not going to jive with this author. The book, to me, felt very tedious to read. I'm someone that loves poetic prose, someone that loves writing that evokes emotion, and someone that loves good descriptive writing, but I just felt mostly that this was tedious to read. There's a disjointed dynamic to the narrative. It bounces around. It can start to feel like biblical genealogy at certain times. There's so many different characters that he's introducing to us in big lumps. Can't keep them all straight. I think the entire novel I was confused about who certain people were. Okay, wait, who is this again? It became less important for me to even know, because it was like, whatever, it doesn't even matter. What are you saying about him right now? It was tedious to read. The narrative felt disjointed. And to me, there's something happening in modern literature. In some ways is good and exciting. In some ways enables an author to take some shortcuts. What it is like these creative formats. In this book, the way it plays out is we're jumping in and out of the story, and we're going into here's a description of the Council for Eugenics and what they're talking about, what they're meeting about here, just like a one-pager. And here's a description of Ethan's painting, retrospective, looking back, where it's presumably hanging in a museum and giving us information about the culture of the Apple Island settlement. But like years later in the museum, I don't know, we never even really get that explained to us, but we get multiple glimpses of painting descriptions from this character, Ethan, who escapes the island, can pass as white, and paints. And so we get this like retrospective narrative of what occurred on the settlement and in this person's life, who would have been this like game-changing painter, apparently. But all of those things kind of interjected into the novel. You walk a fine line. A lot of novels are doing stuff like this today. And sometimes it delivers, sometimes it's good, sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, that's really creative, and it feeds into the story. In This Other Eden, it feels more like you don't have to write a good story. You don't have to write a good narrative. You don't have to connect the dots as much. We can just kind of throw in these disjointed creative devices, and then if anybody has a problem with it, we can just say that you're not getting the art. You're not understanding this creative device or this creative method. I think Audrey McGee delivers with it in The Colony, which, speaking of The Colony, this very closely resembles The Colony. One thing that Paul Harding does well is in giving us Esther. Esther is sort of the matriarchal figure on the island, even without her backstory, which we find out in pieces along the way. But we get glimpses into her inner thoughts. More than any other character, we can feel what she's feeling and sense what she's sensing, and it feels realistic. If there is a triumph in this novel, Esther is the triumph. What I expect from a prestigious prize like the Booker Prize is for each of these 13 books to just be of the most exceptional quality. I'm starting to lower my expectations. I don't know that the Booker Prize has ever really delivered for me on that level, but I still approach it expecting the books to be exceptional, expecting them to be something distinguished. And honestly, the more I read these Booker longlisted books, the more I just feel like, is this really the best we have? Is this really the best that modern writing has to offer? And if it is, then the only conclusion I can come to is that we, as a species, are declining in our ability to create literature. Paul Harding is a better writer than I am, but there's some portions where I just feel the character development is over-embellished. They don't feel human. The narrative is disjointed. I can never really emotionally invest in any of the characters, and then just like some of the creative devices that are used don't really land home for me. I think I would have rather read a nonfiction account of the Malaga Island tragedy than this fictitious representation of it that really doesn't leave me with anything except, ugh, that was tedious.
So one of the things that, as I was thinking about that, I didn't want to write an historical novel.
Right.
The novel is not going to be about Malaga Island. For all sorts of different reasons, the descendants are up there and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it's that, that kind of public domain. It's U.S. history. Settlement was founded by a guy. The real person's name was Benjamin Darling. It's tough not to use that name. It's such a great name. Benjamin Darling and his wife, Patience, I think her name was. It's Patience in the book. I can't.
Right there, that got my attention too. And then what you do with language.